Today's episode is brought to you by Marley's Mutts. Marley's Mutts has many adoptable dogs that are currently in foster care and some that are on Marley's Mutts Rescue Ranch. In addition to the rescue, Marley's Mutts supports a program called Positive Change. The Positive Change program makes a positive and lasting impact on communities by rehabilitating souls and creating second chances using the power of the animal-human bond. Check out today's episode to learn all about it and click the link below to donate to Marley's Mutts today. Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk, the podcast where pet parents, pet guardians, and pet professionals come together to dive into real issues in dog parenting. From controversial training methods to sensitive health topics, we're getting raw and real about what it means to care for our canine companions. Join us every Wednesday for unfiltered conversations, expert insights, and personal stories that will make you laugh, cry, and grow as a pet parent. No topic is off limits and no question goes unanswered. You won't get one perspective here. You'll get them all because every dog is different and every human is too. You can follow along on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Straight Up Dog Talk or by visiting www.straightupdogtalk.com. Tune in from any of your favorite podcast platforms. Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk. I'm Em, and I'm back again this week with another amazing guest. This week, we have Zach Scow from Marley's Mutts and the Positive Change program. How are you doing today, Zach?
I'm doing good. I'm above ground. I'm breathing, and all my dogs are doing all right. My kids are good. So, despite everything that's going down out there, we're doing pretty good.
Wow. Some days it really can be a challenge. And with as many things as you constantly have going on between the rescue and Positive Change program and just juggling a regular life, I'm sure that it's just hard on days when it's a normal day too. So yeah, I really appreciate you being here today.
Of course. It was a lot easier to grind and to just jump in with all of your energy before I had kids. And now that I have kids, that time is kind of non-negotiable. So you have to be a little bit more efficient.
I can't even imagine. I just balance my time with two dogs and that is confusing enough for me most days. I really wanted to give you a little bit of time on the platform because I really respect you for everything that you do. Marley's Mutts is a charity that I have followed since 2012, donated to, I have participated in all of your stuff that you guys do on Facebook. And to watch you grow that and change that over the last 12 years here has just been a really cool thing. I also think that you're providing this really cool program with the Positive Change program. And I don't think that a lot of people know about it or know what it is. So if you wouldn't mind just, telling the listeners a little bit about your story, how that turned into Marley's Mutts, and then how that turned into the Positive Change program.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll do my best to give the abbreviated version because it's quite a roller coaster ride of an origin story, and it's very easy to get caught in so many different aspects of these different stages of my life over the last 15 years. But long story short, I was always a dog fan. I was always attracted to animals. We started rescuing when I was a kid. I found my first dog when I was 8, coming home from school that my parents let us adopt, and watching my dad's relationship with that dog growing up, I think solidified my heart connection with dogs and really like being seen by them. I always felt seen by my dog, whereas I never really felt understood by the world. Even though my nickname was Golden Boy when I was a kid and everyone thought I was just the greatest thing, I did not agree with that assessment. External affirmation from people and things like that, I always felt like was pressure. Time with my dogs always felt affirming. But yeah, to kind of speed through it, I was an alcoholic and a drug addict for as long as I can remember. I mean, from a young age. I was probably an alcoholic by 16. I was drinking every night from probably 16, 17 to when I got sick when I was 28. Just after I turned 28, I started to turn yellow and I started to get very swollen. I started to have this like pregnant belly, this very, very, very large varicose vein belly. And I ignored diagnosis for as long as possible, avoided going to a hospital. And then when I finally did, the nurse brought me into the office and kind of held my hands, and she got a little teary, and because she had known who I was on the streets. And she said, "Honey, you're in liver failure and you need to go to a hospital immediately." And I did not want to hear that. Needless to say, I did not go to a hospital. I just stayed out for as long as I possibly could. And I started leaking blood from both ends. I was in acute liver failure, which is called end stage, END. So you typically die or you get a liver transplant. Those are really only your two options. And I was at Bakersfield Memorial Hospital, and they don't do liver transplant there. And I didn't qualify for a liver transplant because you needed to be sober for 6 months, and I hadn't been sober for 6 hours. So the real mission was to try to get me into a transplant hospital, qualify for a transplant, and then get that transplant. And I just got sicker and sicker. I got addicted to drugs in the hospital in Bakersfield. And then after 6 weeks, I got a really special chance interview with the comprehensive transplant program at Cedars-Sinai, which is where I was born in Beverly Hills. And they admitted me to the program, and they basically said, okay, if you can survive 6 months, we'll get you your liver transplant. But at the time, my prognosis was I was going to die in less than 90 days. They have this Mayo Clinic, it's called a MELD score tracker, and this MELD score will spit out your mortality rate. And so it was 86% chance of mortality within 90 days. So it just didn't look like I was going to live. It didn't look like I was going to survive. And they knew that if they kept me at the hospital, I would die from the drugs that were being administered at the hospital. So they sent me home. I had to go back to an emergency room several times to get shots of dope because I was getting dope sick. I had to kind of con my dad into doing that. While I was sick, my dad would always tell me, son, you need to come home. I can't get the dog. My dog, Tug. I can't get Tug to come into the house. My dog would just sit on the driveway, like look down the driveway waiting for me. So he would always try to get me to use that as motivation to get me to come home. And then when I finally did come home, those dogs really took care of me. You know, I went through opiate withdrawal and thought I was going to die through that experience. I was very fragile. I was in kidney failure, essentially, while I was in the hospital, liver failure, I had pancreatitis, your gallbladder's fucked up, like everything on you fails when you're in liver failure. You have ammonia on your brain too, so you kind of come and go from being aware to being completely unaware of what day it is, what's going on. You're dizzy, you can't tie your shoes, you can't feed yourself, can't go to the bathroom. You're also on medication that's making you go to the bathroom. So it was just a very dire, dark period. I became really suicidal when I got home because I'd never been without alcohol and drugs, and I couldn't. It's a really weird situation to be living in this like malaise of impending death, where you're kind of sort of moving towards maybe getting help, but you don't know if you're going to make it. And I'd never been sober, so I was just dying inside emotionally. The wreckage of my past was catching up with me mentally, and I couldn't sleep, and I was obsessing about. There was just the voices and this chatter and the negative self-talk and the fucking hating of myself just would not go away. It was just plaguing me. And those dogs helped me get through that opiate withdrawal, which was like a couple-day period. And then I just became horrendously suicidal, where I felt like I wasn't going to live, and I don't know how to live, and I'm not going to live anyway, so I might as well do my family a solid and those in my life who I'm bringing down by sort of just eliminating myself. So I would just obsess on ways to do that. Almost all of which involved my dogs, oddly enough. I had this romantic delusion about how I was going to take my life, what the front page, what the article would look like, how it would be titled, man takes his dog on a hike and commit whatever. But it was always with my dogs for some reason. I was always going to off myself as though that's fair to them or something. I don't know. It didn't make any sense. But I committed to, I finally was able to sort of commit to putting one foot in front of the other, really like literally by walking up here in the mountains. Couldn't get very far. I was very, very, very weak. My muscles had all atrophied. I was 140 pounds. I had really bad edema in my ankles and my feet. I had terrible portal hypertension. So I'm coughing up blood constantly. It's called esophageal varices. But I just started to walk, and I started to change everything that went into my body, everything. No more, obviously, alcohol or drugs, but started to make these vegetable smoothies, cook only healthy food for myself and for my dad. And before I knew it, I started to be able to move. They took me off all of my medication, too. That was very important. They fill you up with everything you can possibly think of medically. I mean, they will kill you with medicine. You know, so it was very bizarre getting into the world's foremost transplant program and them telling you, we are not going to keep you here. To save your life, we're going to send you home and we're going to take you off your medicine. Whereas the opposite you'd think would be true is I'm in liver failure. I'm close to death. I need to be in a hospital and need to be taking medications. She was smart enough to say, we need to get you the fuck out of here. And we need to take you off all this shit that is, because your liver is your primary filtering mechanism, as are your kidneys, your gallbladder, your pancreas. And all of those were so sick, yet they're still loading me up with all this stuff. They're giving me antidepressants. They're giving me painkillers, everything you can think of. So it really wasn't until I turned my life over to the care of a God of my understanding and to my dogs that everything started to change. There was one night in particular when I had really reached utmost rock bottom and had soiled myself in my bed, and I was trying to figure out how to clean it up and didn't want to wake my dad up, and had looked at myself in the mirror, like had passed by my reflection and just ended up staring at myself. And as like a formerly vain human being, when you see yourself, when you really like recognize yourself in the throes of death, of like a morbid condition, moment of like existential realization, where I was just looking at myself going, who the fuck is that person? Who is that dude who's looking back at me like I don't recognize this fucking scary individual? Who is this scary, fucked up looking? I looked like the sickest sick person you've ever seen in your life. I was completely purple, all these bruises all over me. I was extraordinarily skinny, but hugely fat because I had these varicose vein, herniated belly button, which I would tape to my stomach so that it didn't poke out of my shirt. I was just so ill, and I didn't have the first idea how to move forward in life. And those dogs really gave me not just the willpower, but the self-esteem to move forward. I think in recovery, if you don't have self-esteem, you can't really accomplish anything. It's really hard to set dreams, goals. If you don't have some ability to love yourself, which is like a direct self-esteem is very much connected to self-love, it's very hard to succeed. And those dogs really gave me the self-esteem that I couldn't provide myself, that really nothing else could provide. And they also gave me just kind of like a social buffer, because I was afraid of everything, people, places, and things. I didn't want to go anywhere. I had to go to meetings to get my liver transplant. That was like I had to go every day, and I was so ill, like people wouldn't talk to me and they would stare at me. And even in the rooms of recovery, it was an very awkward place to be. I also didn't understand how things went, and I was so sick that I was disruptive. I was very disruptive. And it just started to, like, slowly, as I began to put one foot in front of the other, and I'd walk every morning. I try to walk 6 times a day, roughly, just take my dogs in the mountain and just get as far as my feet would take me. And usually do that first thing in the morning. So always get a sunrise in, and then always get a sunset. And with that, my dog started to introduce me to spiritual beauty and to evaluating things from a different perspective and to being in the moment. And I met several kind of people on these walks that would end up being transformative and helpful in my journey. A few months out of the hospital, I started to foster dogs for an organization that I had fostered for before I got sick. And it just took over. It was very interesting how it all went down, because I got so into fostering animals, and because what you need when you're a person in recovery, a human being in recovery, needs boundaries, rules, discipline, affection, love, purpose, helps, and exercise. And the dog in recovery needs rules, boundaries, discipline, exercise, affection, love, and purpose. So as I was giving these dogs this structure, walking them, fulfilling their needs, I had this purpose outside of myself, and just myself surviving wasn't enough of a purpose to keep me going. But being there for these dogs who were homeless and parentless was enough to keep me going. And it not only was enough to keep me going, I started to become like enthralled. It just enveloped my day-to-day. That's all I did. And also, like, creatively, it is very special to write their stories, take their pictures, feel their energy, what they are communicating to you. Are they insecure? What are they fearful of? What are their strengths and weaknesses? And sort of putting together a treatment plan for each dog, how to advertise them creatively, because a lot of these dogs are not your typical highly adoptable individual. I started to have this whole service-minded life that was focused on caring for these animals. And in recovery, they really push service. Service is the way to spirituality. It's the way to purpose. It's the way to living, Christ-like, if you will. And I really started to feel the benefits. I really started to experience the benefits of all that in my life, all of that purpose. And it was bizarre. This was never my goal. I never said, I'm going to create a dog rescue. It was never my plan. I didn't think that they let drunks have nonprofit organizations. I thought for sure, like, I remember the discussion specifically, and someone from one of our veterinary technicians was like, you need to do this. I'm like, do what? They're like, start a dog rescue. I'm like, what the fuck? You're out of your mind. I can't, like, yeah, right. I'm going to submit. They're going to know I was in the hospital. They're going to know I'm a drunk. There's like, they'll ask me. So the first year I was actually doing business as, and then once I had accrued more than 100 adoptions, I submitted all of those adoption applications and their flyers, their advertisement flyers. And then I heard back, and we were approved nonprofit in May of 2010, retroactive to 2009, and we've just never looked back. But the whole organization, all of it, was just born out of trying to put one foot in front of the other, trying to get out of my own head, trying to find purpose outside of my own ego. And then before you know it, I had accrued my 6 months of sobriety, but I didn't need a liver transplant anymore. And that meeting was very remarkable because 6 months prior, Dr. Tran in our meeting, she was like, look, you are very, very ill, and you are on the precipice of living or dying. We just don't know what's going to happen. And there's not much we can tell you. There's not much we can help you with. And 6 months later, she's like, we collectively have been talking about this, and we have no fucking idea what you have done to yourself to like reverse this, but this is remarkable. And she's like, whatever you're doing, you need to keep doing it, because this is a very anomalous situation, and we don't see people regress from end-stage liver failure. And so I didn't get my liver transplant, and I still don't have one. I have what's called stage 3 fibrosis, which is advanced liver disease, but nonetheless, perfectly manageable. So yeah, that's how Marley's Mutts was born, was this very awkward bout with liver failure. And then when it comes to positive change, all of us rescues, all of us bootstrap grassroots rescues are essentially just trying to make it work however we can with foster homes. I think we had 60 foster homes at the time. We were doing great. There were a lot of dogs adopted, but I wanted to do more. And in our county, in Kern County, the shelters were just so bad. I thought to myself, this was in conjunction with having a friend that went to prison, and I adopted a dog to him, which totally changed his life. But we wanted fosters. We wanted way, way, way more fosters that could create structure, discipline, and routine for these animals. So what better place to do that than the prison system? But it took us about 4 years to get in. We started petitioning in 2012, and then we finally got a taker at California City Correctional Facility in 2016, January. So we've operated in 8 facilities since 2016, from level 4, 180 Corcoran State Prison, the most dangerous prison in California, probably the most dangerous prison in the United States, to women's facilities, juvenile facilities. So we've been running Positive Change. And I should say Positive Change is a comprehensive inmate canine training program. So we're training student inmates to become dog trainers, and we're training dogs to one, pass the Canine Good Citizen certification, but also to get adopted and stay adopted. So we're taking euthanasia listed dogs, usually young, large dogs. So dogs that don't have the basics, they don't have leash skills, basic skills, any of those things. And we're putting them through our 14-week-long program to, again, give them the skills to turn them from like a liability into an asset. And the same is being accomplished with our students, who are kind of written off. Many of them have lost their support systems and have been kind of cast away as worthless. And we're really trying to believe in them and to instill in them the belief in themselves that they can and will be positive elements to society. And we're just trying to grow on that in every possible way. We're trying to scale our program so that various municipalities and counties will have access to this kind of a fostering system. As you well know, in the veterinary space, as well as the pet industry as a whole, we can't meet the needs. So there are not enough trainers who are qualified to do training work. There's not enough behaviorists. There's not enough kennel technicians. There's not enough veterinary technicians. There's not enough veterinarians, et cetera, and so forth. And we're at a 15 to 20% deficit year over year in that economy. Positive Change creates dog trainers, behaviorists, dog walkers, all of these essential cogs in the pet industry wheel. So we're trying to address a lot of different things. One is euthanasia, obviously, and adoption, and then the other is lowering recidivism so that formerly incarcerated don't create new victims and don't commit crimes and create new victims at great cost to the taxpayer. And again, like I said, turn them from liabilities into assets, which they very much are. I've never met a segment of the population who are less believed in, but deserve to be believed in many cases by virtue of what they've been through, like the fire they've forged themselves in, because they know a particular type of suffering that I don't think many of us can relate with. So that's essentially the long and short of it. We're right now we're working 2 programs at North Kern State Prison, 2 programs at Tehachapi State Prison, 1 at Victorville Federal Women's Prison, and then we're restarting our boys juvenile and girls juvenile in Bakersfield, hopefully within the next 6 months or so. And just trying to move forward, really just trying to breathe life into both of these like black eyes of our culture. The animal welfare industry is such a black eye. We tend to like keep it out of sight, out of mind. We're euthanizing 2.5 million animals a year. And let's just not really talk about it. Let's just keep that. Let's keep that in the shadows. And what's that? We're incarcerating 2.5 million Americans every year at $100 billion. Okay, well, let's not really talk about that. Let's just, so what better way to make like real altruistic social cultural change than to address both of these shadowy elements of our society and help them work to sort of like cancel each other out.
I mean, obviously, what a crazy wild ride that you have been on here. But also, look at the beauty that you have brought to this. I mean, that the whole point of this podcast, the whole reason I started this podcast was because I went through major surgery that made me become legally disabled. I'm no longer able to be a vet tech because of physical reasons. I don't have the back of my skull or the rungs on C1 and C2, and suffering that medical PTSD and losing my whole trajectory to become a veterinarian from a vet tech position, moving into pet sitting, and now moving into dog training because of this podcast. I started this podcast because I was, like you, tired of us putting things in dark corners. This podcast is here to shine light on those things, because we can't make change in this community unless we shine the light on those dark corners. And if we are able to show people, look, if we can combine these elements, if we can educate trainers, if we can show different ways, if we can work together and stop feeling shame and guilt and just trying to hide behind these social norms that really don't benefit anybody, we can actually probably make something so much bigger and better than anyone could ever expect. And here you are, you're doing that. I mean, you're absolutely doing that. And it's incredible. How many inmates do you think that you have trained over the years now that are now out there actively training dogs and helping people get through because of this program? Do you have a number for that?
27. We have a text threads. We communicate relatively often, and we try to do reunions. We're unable to keep really solid data because we don't have access to it through CDCR. We have 27 guys who are out and are in the space, and many more who have gotten out who are not in the space, but who have not gone back to prison. So our recidivism statistics are like virtually zero. Our success rate for those who do transition into the pet industry is remarkable. And it's also remarkable because a big part of what we've missed in the pet industry is including Black and brown, really just overall marginalized populations, really the poor and Black and brown populations, into solving the problems of animal welfare. We tend to blame strays on the Hispanic population, or we have an area in Bakersfield called Oildale, blame it on the poor whites, blame it on the this, blame it on the that, rather than pulling these segments of our population into the industry to ask for their participation, their help, etc. So a lot of our formerly incarcerated student trainers are Black and brown gang members. And so they're returning to their neck of the woods to bring what they've learned in positive change and apply it to their neighborhoods and really change the culture in terms of how they view animal welfare, which is super helpful. And a lot of our guys are working in those communities. Tons of them are in rescue. I mean, I'd say half of them are doing acute training and board and trains for rescues all over Riverside, San Bernardino, Orange County, LA County. Like, they're just constantly active. Like Jamal, Oscar, these guys are constantly working in the rescue space to train the dogs that we take in that we can't, that we have a really hard time placing.
And I think that's the thing, is that I previously had a dog that was a hard dog. And, this was several years ago, that had to be behaviorally euthanized. I talked about this on a previous podcast episode, and that's a tough decision to make. But I think that more and more people are starting to realize that you can work with these dogs to a certain point, and then there are some dogs that we just can't work to. But there are not enough trainers, I don't think, that are out there that are willing to work with them in a manner that's not abusive, help kind of repair the dog, because dogs suffer trauma and need all the things, like you said earlier, the support, the love, the guidance, the encouragement, the structure, everything, just as much as people do. You've proven that just by telling your story, how much dogs and humans can truly help each other. And I think once you really train a dog that challenges you, it just changes you in a way that makes you just want to do it again and again and again. And so if you find the right people who need that chance, it gives them that outlet. I think that what you're doing is just so incredible. And
I think they relate particularly in a special way as well, because they've been locked away, incarcerated for decades. They've been abandoned by society, so to speak. So there's a patience and a relatability these guys really do see themselves in these dogs in many ways. And some folks just don't understand that dogs who are coming from a shelter environment, they are traumatized. They need to learn how to reintegrate into society just like our guys do. And so they take a particular pride in it as well, because there's a lot of synonymity between the two.
I'm with you. I was one of those people too that like I always kind of just felt like outside of society and like societal validations, and none of that kind of stuff ever meant a whole lot to me. But boy, have I had a string of dogs that really always needed, that extra help. I have one of my dogs currently is 12 or 13 years old, and he was used as a bait dog for the first 2 years of his life. He's a Chihuahua Pomeranian mix. I have no idea how he survived it. And when I got him, he was just a feral little beast. He was mean. He was awful. He bit everyone. And now, after 11 years together, he's just like this little potato dog, and he loves everybody. It took us a good 2 years for him to trust me, for him to not try to bite me every time I gave him his food bowl, because he was so worried that I was going to do something that wasn't mean to him. And I think that giving grace and giving space and learning that from him changed that part of me that still needed to heal too. It's just crazy how much they can contribute to our lives and how much they can change us. And that's why I think programs like yours are so important, because there are a lot of people out there that are misunderstood, and all they really need is a little bit of help and a little bit of belief and a little bit of structure to help themselves succeed, because that self-success is so much more powerful than somebody patting you on the back or giving you a medal, or saying good job or whatever, because that doesn't really mean anything to us if it's not important to us. But when that dog looks at you and that dog comes and curls up in your lap, and that dog just is now attached to your soul in some way, it just hits totally differently.
Yeah, I agree. I think that dogs are medicine in so many ways, and we as people get stuck. We get stuck in low self-esteem. We get stuck in paralysis by analysis. We hold ourselves back from doing things that we know are good for us. And sometimes dogs just give you that little bit of oomph, that little bit of encouragement, whether it's how they get when you come home, or how you feel when you just lay on the ground with them and get your cuddle on, how affirmed you can feel in their presence, how if you take time to notice how they see you, it can really bolster you're lacking in terms of self-esteem. If you let those compliments in that they're trying to give you, if you let that love in, it can really fortify you when you're feeling lonely and you're feeling deprived and baseless and like worthless. And there are some things you can do with your dogs, even just getting the fuck outside with your dog. Exercising with your dog is a really special way to break yourself out of a funk. If you go on a hard hike with your dog and you start depressed, I guarantee you, if you break a nice sweat and get your heart rate up, you're not going to end that hike feeling the same way. It's a natural cure for depressive thoughts. And I think a lot of us that are involved in animal welfare are prone to depression. And a lot of people in animal welfare cope with alcohol and drugs. And I obviously don't and can't do that anymore. But there's another way to use animals to cope, just by sort of meeting their needs, meeting the needs of your dog, which is companionship, structure, discipline, exercise, affection. Just meeting those needs will give it to yourself. And it's a very effective way to break you out of a rut and get you into a groove. In fact, I think about the most productive times of my life, and maybe the most like healthy times of my life, and those were always when my routine was deadlocked into my dog's routine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I think a lot of people, they get dogs and then they bring them home and they're like, this is my cuddle buddy. And they just hang out on the couch and play video games. And to an extent, like that's totally fine. But go out in the yard and play with your dog. Go on a walk, go on a hike, like get involved with your dog, because when you're letting your dog be a dog and you're just enjoying that moment and letting them be who they are, like that's going to bring out a part of you that you probably didn't even know was there. And I think it's just such a beautiful connection that you can create in this relationship with your dog if you're just open to it. Dogs don't care. They love you for exactly who you are. You can be like me on Friday nights having dance parties and using the brush as a microphone with your dog while you're doing the nail trims and the brush sessions and all that. And the dog doesn't care. The dog's like, this is great. And my neighbors probably think I'm crazy, but I don't care because me and the dog are having fun.
Yeah. I struggle socially and I don't take medication. Being a recovering drug addict, I don't trust anything. I don't trust anything from the pharmaceutical industry. Plus, I'm also aware of natural ways to kind of get myself out of it. And like I have a two-legged poodle who's one of my dogs, and she is like the brightest little joy you could ever imagine. And she lives in a backpack that's basically right at eye level, so her head is like on my shoulder right here. And I really struggle sometimes to get outside. I dread it. These people expect this out of me, and I'm really not that, and they think so well of me, and I'm really a piece of shit, and all this same bullshit narrative. But when I strap that backpack on and put that dog in there, and whether we're at prison or just walking the streets of Hermosa Beach like we were last weekend or something, these dogs force you into communal situations where everyone's relating about their dogs, and they force you into these unifying social moments that take away the fear of that I've this perceived fear of social interactions that I've always had. I've always had this fucking irrational fear related to social interactions. Maybe it's judgment, maybe it's who knows, but having that dog with me, I feel so blessed to get to bring her around. Like I basically get to have attached to me. It's like a happiness increaser. Like no matter whom she comes across, I is guaranteed that their happiness level is going to go up X% after. And like what a blessing. I get to do that. And that I also get to springboard off of her positivity, that she gets them feeling a certain way, and that there's also an opportunity for me to slide in there as a human and affirm these people. The only way for me to deal with depression is trying to leave a positive streak wherever I go, like absolutely wherever I go, especially if I'm not feeling like it. And she makes it so much easier to do that. And then I have a golden retriever named Beta who's somewhere, and she's from Lebanon too, and she's just the greatest little fucking dog. I mean, she's not little, but the greatest energy you've ever experienced. She spent 8.5 years in a shelter in Beirut, and I met her in 2017. We brought her back in 2020. Yeah, I feel so blessed to have, and they don't, man, I don't mean to sound like oddly esoteric or like foofy, but man, it is weird. I've had some really tough losses in terms of dogs. One of our dogs got hit by a car. She died in my arms, and she was my absolute heart dog. And then another one bloated right after that. And then these two get brought into my life, and I just feel so lucky to have these therapists. They really are. But it also is directly related to how much you're willing to, you get in a bad enough depression, you don't even want to talk to your dog. And then you get on your own case because you're like, oh, fuck, now my dog hates me. Beta hates me. Look at the way she's looking at me. She's pissed. And like, my dogs don't even like me. I've had the conversation that my dogs don't even like me. That's where my depression takes me sometimes. It's so irrational. But that's how I try to recognize that I've gotten to this terrible point. I'm like, look, see, Cora's, look at how she's looking at me. Even she can't stand being near me. But those are rare moments.
And that's the thing too, is that when it really comes back down to that, you just have to remind yourself that dogs never feel bad for themselves. Dogs, they don't. They don't ever feel bad for themselves. They're just like, oh, that happened. And they keep going. Like, I wish that I could do that with my brain. And there's so many times that I have to look at my dog and remind myself that too, because depression, anxiety, PTSD, I have my own whole little jumble of things. I don't drink as well. So, you and I have a lot of things in common. And I think that both of us have this like outlook that helping the animals helps us. It brings us that inner peace, and it gives us that security in our hearts and our minds that we don't have otherwise. I always say every dog is a piece of my soul. And I think that that's what you're completely displaying. It's like you're just putting your soul out there for everybody. And as much bad talk as we give ourselves, I think, look at what you're doing. Zach.
Yeah, Cora, you hit on something interesting about this. I think now more than ever, we have this tendency to feel sorry for ourselves as a way of getting what we need from people, from society, whatever. I certainly felt this way. That if I could feel bad enough for myself, that others would feel bad for me, and therefore they would kind of give me a pass on certain things. Certainly, that's something that plagued me for a long time. Is like just, I really wanted people to feel sorry for me, so that I would get some leniency and get like kind of a break. And Cora is a double amputee. She shattered her pelvis, broke both of her front legs, her teeth, her back. She broke everything. And she has no front legs. And she still walks and jumps and goes upstairs and downstairs. She forces this moment of it's people's natural reaction when they see her come out of the backpack or when they see her on her wheels. They go, oh, it's the same. It's ubiquitous. My God, poor dog. And then I swear to God, she almost looks up at him like, did you just say fucking poor dog? Are you looking at me, girl? I got pink ears. My fucking shit's blowing in the wind. My nails are done. I'm on my way to In-N-Out Burger with my dad right now. Like, life is good. What are you talking about? Well, get off your pity party. Sorry, sack of shit. She really does, and people will have this moment like, "Oh my god, she's the happiest dog I've ever seen." They always is like perplexed. Like, she's the happy, and they have this realization like, "Oh wow, I guess we're all capable of that. We're all capable of kind of shutting off this feel sorry for myself meter and put it into wherever you're headed." And that's what she's focused on. She's focused on where she's headed, what she's going to do, who she's going to love on. She's such a vibe. We even have this feral cat that showed up to our house as a kitten in the middle of the winter. We live in the fucking mountains, bare mountain lion bobcat country. It is not safe for a little teeny cat. It was a kitten. She somehow made made her a couple stations in the garage, and she survived the winter. We obviously couldn't get close to her, and like every month we get like an inch closer to her. And we're now about 8 months in, and we can touch her on the nose. That's all she'll let us do. And she tries to look at Beta, my golden, to engage with her. But when it comes to Cora, we just put Cora down on the ground, and that fucking cat loses her mind. All she wants to do is play with Cora, and I mean play like the two of them romp around. And this is a fundamentally, she was a part of a TNR program. Her left ear is clipped, so she's spayed. We have no idea where she came from, no idea how she made it all the way up in the mountains. But her little best friend, because she picks up that vibe from Cora. Cora's got this like, oh, I'm good people to be around, and the cat knows
Party
it.
is here.
Totally.
That's just incredible. What a cool story. And Cora, she's on your Instagram. She's such a delightful little thing. I've watched her story, the whole process with the amputations and everything. And she just completely rebounded it and was like, hey, I'm good. It's all good. I'm fine. And she like hops around on her little back feet. And
rules were meant to be broken because
yes.
the society told us that society, meaning the lead veterinary technician, would not sit on her surgery. So they said, look, this is cruel and unusual. We're not going to let you amputate this dog's legs. You need to put her to sleep. Like, that's not happening. And we said, kindly fuck off. We are, because we'd already done one dog who'd come to me prior, who's my foster dog. And she was so successful in her transition to mobility and viability that we knew we could succeed. And it was really interesting. Like, we had our fourth double front leg amputee, because then we just started getting calls from rescues. Anytime they had a bilateral fracture of the front legs where they had to amputate, they're like, let's call Marley's Mutts and see if they can help. So we got a German Shepherd, a big dog who had to have both. He was ejected out of the back of a pickup truck. Owner was driving around. He got a bilateral avulsion of the nerves so the nerves pulled out of his armpit. So his legs just palsied. He was like rigor mortis. So they had to come off. And when she was helping me wheel him to the car to put him in the back seat after his second amputation, she said, hey, how's Cora? And I was like, oh, she's great. She goes, I just want you to know I was the veterinary technician that didn't want to do the surgery, and I just want to apologize, and I'm so grateful for you guys, and thank you for doing what you're doing. And I was like, we both cried and hugged.
Circle moment. Oh, I love it.
And
when
I get where they were coming from too. You get where they're coming from. When you see that little girl post-surgery with that line across her chest and both legs are gone, you go, oh fuck, what did we do? You think to yourself, oh my God, because her pelvis was shattered. She couldn't move at all. She was completely immobile. And you think, oh my goodness. And then, of course, Facebook's going nuts. Everyone's telling you you're an animal abuser and what's wrong with you. And you're just doing this for clicks, not realizing like every meal she had, we had to nurse her through the whole experience, which is very laborious. But now they're viable. And now it's like known. So now when we have those injuries in rescue and in animal sheltering, it's all viable. So, which is great. Same with like Hooch, our dog who had no tongue. Now, no tongue is no big deal. Whereas before it was unthinkable.
Look at you out there breaking rules and surviving for yourself and for these dogs. Like, you just bring such a different perspective to the community. And I just appreciate you so much for shedding the light in the dark places. And I definitely would love to have you come back and have another conversation and maybe have one of your mates come with you and do it as well. I would love to do that and share that with the listeners.
A few of the fellas, if you want to have them on, definitely.
Absolutely. I would absolutely love that. Well, what would you like to leave the listeners with today?
I guess what I would say is, spinning off of what I said earlier, was to just try to leave a positive streak wherever you go. You never know what people are going through. But one thing is for sure, we all have this spiritual godly light inside of us that we can touch people with, and that we can offer to just about everybody we come in contact with, which is really like the way of your dog. So just try to be more like your dog. Try to wag your tail and wiggle your butt and lick faces more often. You know what I mean?
I love it. Well, Zach, thank you so much for being here on this episode of Straight Up Dog Talk. And you guys, we will see you next week.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Straight Up Dog Talk was created by Emily Breslin. It is edited and produced under the supervision of Straight Up Dog Talk, LLC, and Emily Breslin. If you're enjoying this podcast, follow or subscribe and be sure you don't miss an episode. And leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Looking for more honest and relatable dog content? Check out our sister show, Unpacked, with Jerry Sheriff and Madison Simpson. Thanks for listening to Straight Up Dog Talk. See you next week.